Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, April 8th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Mununu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. A special D.C. to New York edition. Down here, Jill, talking to a couple foreign officials in town to negotiate those tariffs, including the Israeli Prime Minister. So hope to have more details on that for all of you tomorrow.
And to be clear, I'm still holding it down from New York.
Somebody had to hold it down because New York is spinning right now.
Yes, as some of you guys may know, I used to be based on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. I was the Money Watch correspondent for CBS News, which is actually how Moshe and I know each other. And I am trying to get back down there for a day of reporting from the floor this week because it seems to be quite eventful, Moshe. So hopefully that will come through. Yes,
in recent years, of course, so much trading has gone electronic. There are still a handful of human beings on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. And so, you know, it's days like these where there's still something to be seen and reported out on the floor of the exchange.
Okay, with that, let's get to some headlines here. Another down day for stocks as the world reacts to President Trump's tariff announcements, including a new threat to take China's tariffs up to 104%.
Yes, that is a real number.
We've got the latest roller coaster, the reactions, the negotiations.
And the new term Trump has coined, panicking, like Republican, but if you panic, as in a political party where people panic, he's trying to make panicking happen. We'll explain.
Plus, the Supreme Court weighs in on the administration's accidental deportation of a migrant who was not supposed to be sent to El Salvador. The latest on the repeated outages on the Social Security website. What's behind it? The U.S. gets set for direct negotiations with Iran starting this weekend. That hasn't happened in years.
Yes, in fact, those talks ended in the first Trump term.
The tech world is reacting to the tariffs. Apple looking for options to prevent the price of an iPhone from going up by $400 or more. And done and dusted, Houston and Florida faced off last night in the NCAA championship game. We'll tell you what happened. Plus, Moshe has on this day in history.
I've got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell on this day in history.
I don't know.
Jill, it's literally the most famous. Well, we'll tell you about it at the end of the podcast. I know some of you out there understood that reference.
I feel like I lose street cred sometimes when I don't know some of these clues.
This was during your peak era.
I know, I'm going to kick myself. It sounds familiar. I just don't know it. All right, another wild day for the stock market on Monday as the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell for a third straight day following President Trump's tariff rollout. Investors were looking for any signs that perhaps the White House was going to slow down the rollout of the tariffs or even pause the implementation. But all signs still point to a go, even as the White House says it's negotiating with numerous countries. At the same time, the president threatened even higher rates against China yesterday, up to 104% levies. Yes, 104% on products from China in response to China's latest counter tariffs, which means if those costs are passed on to consumers, everything from China would basically cost double.
For those wondering how we got here, I'll recap that just a little bit later in this podcast.
It all comes as the White House says that it is set on collecting those massive reciprocal tariffs on 60 countries starting tomorrow, like 46% on Vietnam, 49% on Cambodia, 20% on the EU, and 36% on Thailand. The stock trading session was a wild one as traders tried to speculate when the market would bottom out from Trump's tariff turmoil, with the Dow posting its largest same-day point swing ever recorded. Trading volume also reached its highest level in nearly 2 decades, with markets trading about 29 billion shares. The markets even briefly went into the green this morning because of a rumor that the tariffs could be paused for 90 days. That was an idea floated by Bill Ackman. He is a well-known investor and also a Trump supporter. The news spread across social media and was reported by some traditional media outlets before causing the markets to spike.
Yes, it caused a wild swing on Monday morning. In fact, the value of the market increased by $2.5 trillion off of that rumor, based on a tweet of what a White House advisor said in an interview that was taken out of context and then corrected, and then the market plunged again.
Right. I was watching CNBC, and even the anchors were like, what is happening? Why is the market going up right now? They finally figured out what it was potentially based on, this 90-day pause. So they have a correspondent at the White House. He was like, I have not heard of this. He asked his contact at the White House, and finally Caroline Leavitt said, fake news. And with that, the markets plunged again. Trump himself was asked if he would consider that 90-day tariff pause when he was in the Oval Office later in the day. Here's what he said.
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals. And in certain cases, they're going to be paying substantial tariffs.
Over the weekend, the White House said more than 50 of the 60-plus countries that are set to face reciprocal tariffs reached out to start trade talks with the president. He had a few of those conversations yesterday, starting with a phone call early Monday morning with the Prime Minister of Japan. On the call, the Japanese Prime Minister raised concerns that 24% tariffs on his country, plus the 25% auto tariffs, could weaken Japanese companies' ability to invest in the United States. Japan is the U.S.'s largest source of foreign direct investment and one of the top buyers of U.S. goods. After the call, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the conversation constructive and said Trump tasked him and the U.S. Trade Representative to begin tariff talks with Japan, which marks the first official negotiations.
Yeah, we should also note that Japan actually holds more U.S. debt than China. So a very valuable relationship, one that goes way back. And there's been a lot of open trading between the partners there. And so the Japanese here saying, hey, let's talk about this. But again, the move from the White House last week was to announce all of these tariffs and then begin negotiations, as opposed to pre-negotiate anything, as a number of countries, the EU and others, have been saying for weeks, hey, can we talk about this whole tariff plan? Nonetheless, here, they are opening these talks. That is something that the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, here was pushing the president to do, to try to calm the markets down, to show that there is an end game here, that these tariffs are not there for the rest of time. And there is an ability for countries to negotiate out of these tariffs. The first in-person negotiation that took place on Monday at the White House was with the Israeli Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington, the first foreign leader to meet with Trump since the announcement of the tariffs. Israel, for example, was hit with a 17% tariff by the U.S., even though they are a close ally of the U.S., even though they announced before Wednesday that they were eliminating their own tariffs on the U.S. Still, the U.S. went ahead with them. So the prime minister reiterating that the tariffs are gone on the Israeli side, and also that the Israelis would seek to eliminate the trade deficit that Israel has with the U.S. Now, this is minor by comparison to some of the trade deficits we're talking about. It's about a $7 billion deficit. Israel buys about $15 billion of goods from the U.S. The U.S. buys about $22 billion in goods from Israel. It's not clear how the Israelis will do that. That's one of the big questions we're asking when it comes to the trade deficit with these much smaller countries, is how will they just suddenly, out of the blue, buy all this U.S. stuff to make up for the U.S. buying whatever it is from their countries, respectively. Nonetheless, the U.S. still, Trump sitting beside him, didn't promise to eliminate the tariffs on Israel yet, despite those assurances. He is, continuing these negotiations here, says that the U.S. has been treated unfairly by the world. And so, he wants to see more. Now, it does come as the business community, a lot of Trump supporters are turning sour here, at least on Wall Street. You mentioned Bill Ackman. He was a very vocal supporter of the president. He's a billionaire investor here. He has been tweeting up a storm. He was a big Trump guy. He says Trump is effectively leading to an economic nuclear winter. If this continues, he's got to lift this. This is effectively a tax on Americans. This is going to eliminate investment. This is basically going to close the U.S. out from the world. And this has a lot of negative ramifications. We are hearing that from people behind the scenes, too, who are not willing to go public yet with their views because of their fears of criticizing the president openly. Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, that is the firm that controls about $12 trillion, the world's largest money manager. He says that he won't rule out another 20% drop on top of what we've seen in the market. The initial 20% drop, so that'd be 40%, nearly cut in half. From what we've seen. He says that most CEOs he talks to believe we're already now in a recession, even though we don't have the numbers to show for it, given what's unfolded here over the next couple of weeks. And so we are seeing these negotiations. The EU reached out yesterday. They promised a zero tariff policy. Now, this is something they've been talking about for weeks. The president apparently wasn't interested in it. They reiterated, they're like, listen, we're willing to do zero for zero here. But Trump asked about it yesterday, said, no, I'm looking for more from the EU. You have a huge trade deficit with us when it comes to goods, a $350 billion deficit, meaning how much the U.S. is buying from Europe versus what Europe buys from the U.S. the Europeans say, hold on one second, you have a services surplus with us. Services are like financial services, logistics, business consulting, professional services, science, a whole bunch of things that we sell to Europe, which we have a surplus on. But right now, the White House is only counting goods, things that are like materially made in a factory. As far as they're concerned, that is the deficit they're talking about. They don't care about the services deficit or the services surplus, I should say. And so we'll see how those negotiations unfold. It does come at the same time that the EU, while it says it'll offer 0 for 0, they say if the U.S. isn't open to that deal, they will retaliate with their own 25% tariffs on a number of U.S. goods. We're talking about Harley Davidson motorcycles. We're talking about tobacco. We're talking about whiskey. The EU has been very specific to try to target goods made in red states, people who support Donald Trump, hoping that they'll feel the pinch and put pressure on the White House.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro echoed the rejection of countries' zero tariff offers. Over the weekend, Vietnam had offered 0% tariffs on U.S. goods to try to lower Trump's 46% tariffs on Vietnam. But on CNBC Monday morning, Navarro called it a small first start, but said the issue is a lot bigger than just tariffs, a concept that the president also echoed later in the day. They're talking about something called non-tariff cheating. So they accused other countries of unfair trade practices, including currency manipulation, market dumping, intellectual property theft, having sweatshops and child labor, and exploiting pollution havens, saying that each country, quote, cheats in a different way. So here is an explanation into how Navarro and Trump are thinking about these negotiations.
They all cheat us in a different way. So here are the things they cheat us on. Some of them engage in currency manipulation. Some of them have a hefty VAT tax. All of them dump into our markets. All of them engage in heavy export subsidies and government subsidies. All of them put up these phony technical and phytosanitary barriers to our ag products and our autos and everything in between. Many of them steal our intellectual property. A lot of them run sweatshop labor, including forced child labor. They have pollution havens. So when you say to me, Ed, what do we want from them? We want fairness.
So Moshe, I was watching this interview with Navarro and CNBC on Monday morning, and one of the things that even the anchors pointed out and asked Navarro is this type of stuff that you're talking about is a lot tougher to negotiate, and it's going to take a lot longer than just, say, a country coming in and say, like Israel had and Vietnam, all right, we'll do 0% tariffs and this all goes away, which means that these types of negotiations could be going on for quite a while. This interview with Navarro was just a few hours before Trump threatened more tariffs on China, which he has said he will not negotiate with. On Monday, the president announced a potential imposition of additional 50% tariffs on Chinese imports by Wednesday if China doesn't retract its recently imposed 34% retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. goods by today at noon. China had threatened to impose those retaliatory tariffs on Thursday. Trump has indicated that these additional tariffs are part of a broader strategy to penalize countries that retaliate against U.S. tariffs. So, Moshe, you want to just give us a recap here? Because it sounds just like a lot of they did this, we did this, they did this.
So, well, I mean, we could go, depends on when you want to start. But for those of you who have your scorecards
2025.
ready. For those of you who have scorecards ready, 2025 began with China and the U.S. each having about 20% tariffs on the other. Trump effectively taking that up to 20%, so 20 on 20. Then Trump announced last week an additional 34% on top of that. So that is 54% tariffs on Chinese goods coming to the U.S. China responded by saying, okay, we'll go 34% more on ours. So we will meet your 54% with our 54%. Trump said, oh, yeah? Yesterday? Well, I'm going to now take my tariffs up another 50% to 104% if you don't take back your 34% and go back down to 20. So you basically have a deal right now where, as of this recording, we are now promising 104% tariffs on Chinese goods. The Chinese right now, and we'll see what happens overnight because, of course, it's daytime now in China. We'll see where they go. But right now, they're at 54% on us. But they might easily say here, you know what, Trump? Fine, we'll go up 50. And so we will both now have 104% tariffs on one another. That appears to be the direction things are going in here, unless cooler heads prevail. And so, what was interesting yesterday also is you had the Chinese respond by quoting Reagan. Of all people, Reagan was very anti-tariff. He said in a video in 1987 High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and trigger fierce trade wars. So China basically being like, oh, you're the party of Reagan? Look what Reagan had to say about tariffs. But it does not appear that that's having much of an impact at the White House here. Trump, meanwhile, telling people not to panic. On Monday, he did a couple posts over on Truth Social, his social media page. Among others, he said that the U.S. now has a chance to do something that should have been done decades ago, all caps. Don't be weak, exclamation point. Don't be stupid, exclamation point. Don't be, in all caps here, a panican. P-A-N-I-C-A-N, panic. And then he explains it in parentheticals, a new party based on weak and stupid people. Be strong, courageous, and patient, and greatness will be the result. Those were among his posts. So, Jill, everyone on Wall Street is just being a panican right now. Okay.
I tend to always be a panican. I'm a panican parent. So
you just didn't know that was the word for it. You never called yourself a panican until now. Jill, it came a day after he sort of quoted New Kids on the Block by telling everyone to hang tough. Was that were the New Kids on the Block back in the early 90s, were they singing about tariffs when they told everyone to hang tough?
And we're just a few months after J.D. Vance told, I forget who, to take a chill pill. Like, I feel like this team is really into the 90s.
A chill pill, like hang tough, don't be a panican. That's a new one. But in all seriousness, like we have seen like $10 trillion in value eliminated from the market over the course of the past few days. There are executives, some of whom were big Trump supporters, were very concerned about the direction here. You certainly... Like, we're not privy to the conversations right now until there are more leaks from the White House, but the conversations happening behind the scenes. But genuinely here, as we're now less than 24 hours out from these new reciprocal tariffs going into effect, again, 46% on Vietnam, 104% on China. I mean, this is real life ramifications. Businesses are like, how do we plan around this? You're seeing companies pause shipment of items right now until they get a hold on this. We're going to talk about Apple here in a second and what they're trying to do for the iPhone to try to save hundreds of dollars per customer on all of this. So there are real life ramifications, and there are concerns that some folks at the White House don't understand what they're playing with here. But you also have the White House here saying, no, we totally know what we're doing. And interestingly, you have Republicans on Capitol Hill who are like, hey, cut it out. Please tell everyone this is just a negotiation because we need to calm some things because people are seeing their 401k plans, especially people who are planning to retire like this year or who are retirees on a fixed budget who are like, oh my God, like I just saw a bunch of my money evaporate, basically. Not everyone has a cushion or has decades before retirement. And then you have other Republicans, Speaker Johnson, for example, who is like, let's give Trump some space. It's only been a few days. Let's give him some room to figure out what it is that he's figuring out right now and let it have a chance to succeed. But I mean, to the point you made, Jill, some of the things that he's trying to do, move manufacturing to the U.S., these are 70-year trends that we've seen that are not going to move over overnight. Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, was on shows over the weekend where he's like, we need to move iPhone factories here. People are like, what do you mean we're going to move iPhone factories here from China? He's like, that's the goal. I mean, these are hugely ambitious, some would say unrealistic goals at times that they have here. So what is the end game? Can he declare victory on certain, tariffs being dropped on U.S. products? That's what his supporters and some people around him are hoping for here. And so we're really watching this day by day. And again, tomorrow, April 9th, is the big day when these huge tariffs on about 60 countries go into effect.
All right, time for the speed read from the Hill. The latest update on the Trump administration's war with the courts over his immigration policies. Chief Justice John Roberts agreed yesterday to pause a midnight deadline for the Trump administration to return a Maryland man mistakenly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. The temporary order comes hours after a Justice Department emergency appeal to the Supreme Court, arguing that a U.S. district judge overstepped her authority when she ordered Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be returned to the United States. The administration has conceded that Abrego Garcia should not have been sent to El Salvador because an immigration judge found that he likely would face persecution by local gangs. But at the same time, the White House argues that he is no longer in U.S. custody, and therefore the government has no way to get him back since he is now in his home country of El Salvador.
Yeah, this is back when Trump invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act last month to deport hundreds of illegal migrants without going before a judge. It has now turned out that at least one of these individuals, and there's accusations about a couple others, Abrego Garcia, literally was not supposed to be deported to El Salvador. So in court, effectively, the administration admitted that. Yeah, we call it a administrative error or clerical error. But they say that they can't get him out of there. He's Salvadorian. He's in El Salvador. And we all need to move on. And ultimately, they say that, he was a member of the MS-13 gang. We haven't seen much evidence of that besides some hearsay from back in 2019. And a court, we should note, back in 2019, did say that the U.S. could deport him, just not to El Salvador, where he faced threats of gang violence. So now things escalate up the courts. The Supreme Court has put this pause on this. We expect more filings today. It does come as the court in between the district court and the Supreme Court. The appeals court actually unanimously denied the DOJ request to block the judge's order. So the district judge said, get him back here. And so the White House went all the way up to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, as they went to the appeals court said, yep, we back up the district judge. You got to get him back here. And now you have the Supreme Court saying, pause. We want more details on this. So we're going to look for more filings on that today. All right, a late update here on Monday night. The Supreme Court also delivered another ruling. That was a win for the Trump administration late on Monday night, saying that the administration can continue deporting alleged Venezuelan gang members under that 200-year-old plus law. This is the law we keep mentioning, the 1798 Alien Enemies Act, a very controversial law that's only been used 3 times in American history. Always during wartime. The Trump administration has argued that what's happening on the border is in fact an invasion, is war. Now, what the Trump administration has been saying is that the law applies to Venezuelan gang members who they have declared a terror group, and they're deemed to be invading the U.S., and the U.S. can deport anybody allegedly part of that gang without going to a judge. So the Supreme Court handled the question in an unsigned opinion on Monday night, a 5-4 majority, 5 conservatives, 3 liberals, plus Amy Coney Barrett, the conservative, joins the liberals here in the 5-4 ruling. The conservative majority did not rule on the overall Alien Enemies Act, but did say that the Trump administration can continue with the deportations with one very important caveat, that here on out, if they use the Alien Enemies Act, they still have to go through a judge. So you have here a declaration of victory from the Trump administration. You're going to be seeing that today, saying, yep, the Supreme Court ruled in our favor. At the same time, you have some liberals, the ACLU and others, who say, wait, hold on a second. The Supreme Court also ruled that you can use the act, but you do have to go through a judge. That what you did last month, where you deported 200 plus people without going through a judge, the court said, no. We will not allow that. And that's by a 9-0 majority. The court saying you still have to go through a judge. You can't just deport people without due process. So a ruling here, again, that allows the Trump administration to proceed with the Alien Enemies Act, but ultimately does draw an important caveat. This case was brought by 5 Venezuelan immigrants who challenged the policy, but the Supreme Court ruled in this case they did so in the wrong court. They say you have to handle your cases where you are being held in Texas. Now, they didn't want to do it in Texas because the Texas judges are very amenable, very sympathetic to the Trump administration, but they did say go back to the judges to protest you being deported under the Alien Enemies Act. So again, here, a ruling they can continue to use this 200-plus-year-old law, but they do have to go through a judge. That's something the Trump administration did not go through before. Now, what that means for the individuals who've already been deported and are sitting in that El Salvadorian prison, we don't know. Their lawyers said they did not get notice of approval. They didn't get due process. And so we will wait to hear more here, potentially from a lower court, as to what happens to those individuals being held in El Salvador. But the Supreme Court rules on what needs to happen moving forward here.
From the Washington Post, retirees and disabled people are facing repeated website outages while trying to access their Social Security accounts. Despite the agency encouraging more people to use the online portal, outages in the last few weeks have lasted anywhere from 20 minutes to almost a day, affecting 73 million Americans that the agency serves. When the site is online, many customers haven't been able to sign into their accounts, or they have found information missing when they get on. Some of the most vulnerable customers, including 7.4 million adults and children receiving anti-poverty benefits, were faced with alarming messages on the site saying that they were not currently receiving payments, later to realize that they were. The issues come just weeks after the Trump administration, led by Elon Musk and DOGE, cut thousands of jobs and is preparing to cut thousands more.
Yeah, Musk, among the other cuts, has specifically sought to cut the technology division responsible for the website by 50% of the staff. So this, if this rings familiar, this is a bit of what he did over at Twitter when he bought Twitter. The issue is outages on Twitter are one thing. outages for Social Security beneficiaries is another thing.
Right. On the one hand, kind of annoying when you want to go on Twitter, check what's going on, write a tweet, whatever it may be. On the other hand, a lifeline that millions of people rely on.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of nervousness among Americans that there will be changes at the federal level when it comes to their benefits here. So a lot of people have been searching to the website here, looking for details, checking in on what their benefits are, the things that, you can access on the website. Now, the concern continues to grow here. The Social Security Administration says they're actively investigating the root cause here. But, again, admittedly, within the administration, they say, we've cut a whole bunch of people who typically deal with the website. And there's a surge on the website. So that's probably the issue here. And we should note, if you have somebody who you know or you receive Social Security benefits, the chaos could continue here. April 14th is a big day. There are new ID measures that are set to take effect here that will require millions of customers applying for benefits to authenticate their identity online. This is part of their attempt to root out fraud. So a lot of this has to do with some of these new expanded fraud check systems, this new ID system, and the high volume of users all together here. One senior official telling the Post, we're spiking like crazy. It's people who are terrified that DOGE is messing with our systems. It's the sheer massive volume of freaked out people is the issue here.
Wait, you mean more panicking?
These are panicins on the Social Security level, like the panicking here, panicking there. I should mention, though, Trump has assured everybody in multiple questions about this. In fact, he said, stop asking me about it. I will not cut people's benefits. We are just trying to root out fraud. But some people see that as one and the same. Some people are still concerned about it. So this is a story that we'll continue to monitor.
From the Associated Press, President Trump said his administration will begin direct nuclear talks with Iranian officials on Saturday. That is the first direct negotiations between the two countries since Trump withdrew from the previous nuclear agreement during his first term in 2018. Iran's leadership had initially only agreed to negotiations through a third party. Trump made the surprise announcement during a press conference in the Oval Office on Monday, sitting next to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he said U.S. officials would be speaking with Iranians, quote, at almost the highest level. Tehran has insisted that it is enriching uranium for peaceful purposes and has refused to abandon its nuclear program for decades. But the Trump administration has laid out the ambitious goal of dismantling Iran's nuclear program entirely, as experts believe the country could be just weeks away from being able to assemble a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, it was interesting. Trump in the Oval Office yesterday said, I think everyone agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. What is the obvious? The obvious is, and he didn't say it aloud, is military strikes on Iran to basically set back their nuclear program. It's something the Israelis did to the Syrians when they were close to nuclear weapons. It's something the Israelis did back in the 80s to the Iraqis when they were close to nuclear weapons. And there's been talk for years that, whether a military strike is going to be necessary here on Iran. So Trump has been trying to pursue both they refer to it as a carrots and sticks strategy, giving them carrots by talks, sticks, punishment, what they did to the Houthis in Yemen recently, and continued threats about going in militarily, making things really painful for an Iranian economy that is already in pretty difficult straits. And so here, these direct talks are going to happen this weekend. It's something we're going to watch very closely.
Back to the tariffs. This from the Wall Street Journal. Apple is looking to send more of its iPhones that are made in India to U.S. consumers. It believes that will offset some of the tariffs imposed on Chinese imports, given how many of their phones are manufactured in China. So this is a short-term stopgap while Apple tries to negotiate an exemption from Trump's tariffs, which they did get during his first term. Chinese goods are tariffed 54%, and as we've been discussing, maybe more. Indian goods are tariffed about half that amount at 26%. India manufactures about 25 million iPhones this year, but about 10 million of those would normally go to the Indian market. But if Apple were to redirect those to the U.S. market, it could meet about 50% of American demand, which would mean that it wouldn't have to rely completely on those phones made in China for its U.S. market, which face even higher tariffs.
Yeah, Apple and a number of other companies have been trying to transition away from China for years. They've been making bets on markets like Vietnam and India, and now you have these tariffs on all of the above countries, but obviously China's being the highest here. And it comes as the company has experienced a 20% decline in its shares, given how much it relies on China for manufacturing its biggest product. just to give you a sense of how much this could cost here. Right now on the iPhone 16, they have about $550 in hardware costs. The tariffs here could add anywhere from $300 to $600 to those costs. Now, the iPhone sells for about $1,000, which means the iPhone would go up to $1,300 to $1,600, depending on what we're seeing here. Apple trying to adjust accordingly, and that's why these tariffs, the way they were announced, the way that they're rolled out, the way they're being negotiated while they're there, is leading to a lot of headaches and concern within the business world about what they do on a day-by-day basis as they watch, in fact, minute-by-minute basis as they watch all these headlines. Finally here, a late-night development from CBS Sports. The NCAA National Men's Championship game in college basketball took place last night. Some of you may have watched it. Florida is the winner, winning their third ever title. Florida took down Houston in the 65-63 thriller, preventing Houston from getting their first ever title. Again, this is the Gators' third championship. They won back-to-back in 2006 and 2007. So now they won in what was the closest final in about 15 years. Houston did lead early in the second half by a double-digit margin, but then the Florida Gators mounted their comeback. They hung around, they cut it down, and then Houston sort of collapsed at the end. Notably, the Florida Gators coach, Todd Golden, at 39 years old, becomes the youngest men's basketball coach to win an NCAA title since Jim Valvano, back in 1983. For some of you familiar with college basketball, Jimmy V, a legend. Nonetheless, congrats to all you Gators fans out there on your big win last night. All right, now time for On This Day in History. Happy birthday, Buddha. At least in Japan. In Japan today, they celebrate the birth of Buddha, who lived sometime between the 6th and 4th century BCE, the founder of Buddhism. We should note that Buddha has a different birthday depending on where you go, especially in Asia. But today, his birthday is in Japan. All right, on this day in 1973, Pablo Picasso, one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, died in France at the age of 91. I bring this up only, Jill, because people are always shocked to realize that Picasso lived into the 1970s.
Right. When you say Picasso, at least I think hundreds of years ago.
Right. Like Monet and Da Vinci and Michelangelo. It's like, no, Picasso mainly lived in the 20th century. Like, he was hanging out. He was flying on planes. He was enjoying the 60s like everybody else. Anyway, Picasso, a artistic legend. Also lost on this day in 1994, at least we learned he died. Kurt Cobain, the leader of Nirvana, one of the most gifted and promising bands, was found dead on this day, April 8th, 1994. He was 27 years old. I, like a number of you of a certain age, learned the news from Kurt Loder on MTV. Remember MTV News, Jill?
I remember it. I wanted to report for it. I knew it all. Is it around anymore?
They've tried to keep it around. I mean, not like in its form. I mean, that was like basically in that era of the mid-90s, you had like Entertainment Tonight and you had like MTV News for like younger people. And like those were your sources. There was no TMZ. There was no, all these websites and social media accounts and the celebrity news of today. I mean, you only had a couple places to go. By the way, if I'm going to age us, Kurt Loder next month turns 80 years old.
No. That you're kidding. I did not think you were going to go that far.
No,
oh
I did.
God.
I did. I'm sorry, everybody. Anyway, here's
80? I mean, nothing
Kurt.
Against 80-year-olds. I thought you were going to say 60, maybe.
No, Kurt.
80. Oh
when we were
God.
getting news from Kurt, he was already in his 50s. One more item here on this day in history before we get to my favorite piece of On This Day in History. On this day, a year ago, 2024, a total solar eclipse occurred across parts of Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. You probably remember where you were for that last year. It was our last total solar eclipse that everyone in America will have a chance to see until 2045. So we still got 20 years to go until we get another one of those. When Kurt Loder will be turning 100 years old, Jill.
I do remember the solar eclipse from last year because my mom kind of jerry-rigged a cereal box to figure out how to make it like a solar, not the glasses, but similar.
And finally here, your clue from the top, more cowbell. One of the most famous SNL sketches of all time aired on this day, April 8th, 2000, on Saturday Night Live. Jill, this is such a big segment that SNL, for its 50th birthday this year, they have a specific documentary just about the cowbell sketch over on Peacock. If you stream Peacock or have access to it, I don't know if it's available anywhere else yet, but they literally just did like a documentary about this sketch. Will Ferrell, of course, clanking the cowbell, and the voice you heard there, very recognizable, Christopher Walken.
And I just watched SNL 50 for the 50th anniversary, so I definitely should have gotten that one.
You got up to go get popcorn at that moment.
Yes,
they were recapping that.
one of my many bathroom breaks. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It truly helps us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And the reviews also matter. So please give us a kind review in the App Store. We are begging here.
Well, if you give us more kind reviews and you continue to get more of your friends and family to listen into the podcast, follow Mo News, we can afford a cowbell. And we will incorporate a cowbell. You know, people were asking on the premium account over the weekend, Jill, we were talking about the theme song for the Mo News podcast. People were like, where's the theme song from? I was like, well, let me give you a little clue. When we launched this, we made $0. It was a loss operation. And so it's a free song that's available to everyone. So if you hear the Mo News theme song in other places and commercials and stuff, which I know some of you have, that's because it's like
I've never heard it.
It's like from a free library. They're like, oh my God, Moshe, they stole your theme song. I'm like, no. They didn't steal anything. It's a free theme song. So in fact, we have some composers who are premium members who have like said, hey, I will compose a theme song for you guys. But as we learned from White Lotus, you know, people are pretty prickly about their theme song. So I don't know how you guys will feel, but you know, maybe some cowbell to the current theme song. Maybe that's all we need.
I love our theme song. I remember picking it out with you, and we narrowed it down to some finalists, and
yes,
a bunch of people weighed in. I love the theme song, but if somebody wants to write us a custom one, I'm all for it.
More cowbell. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.